All right, so Greg with Trident Home Loans. I'm here with John from DV Home Inspections, who's partnered up with WDO Pro to be one of our gold sponsors at the event later this month, the Home Sweet Home Block Party. And John, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. So one of the things I do to help kind of build business with realtors is a lunch and learn, and one of the topics I did recently was on Chat GPT. So I have asked Chat GPT for the most common questions to ask either a home inspector or a mortgage loan originator. And so let's dive into it and see what we can come up with, right? Yes. So the first question I've got for you is, what advice would you give first-time home buyers to prepare for their home inspection?
Yeah, this is a good question. So, for all of you first-time home buyers out there, first thing that you'll want to kind of be sure about before you call a home inspector is, what kind of inspections do you need? And a lot of those answers will come from your mortgage loan originator, and it may come from your insurance company. So there's a few different types of services out there, particularly in the state of Florida, that home buyers might be interested in. First, there's the general home inspection. And the general home inspection is information for the buyer, just themselves. It's going to be the information that they need in order to negotiate with the seller for any problems that are found during the home inspection process. That document is specifically for the buyer. And sometimes the buyer will ask the realtor to come along and help them decipher what's inside this document, etc., from the home inspector. A good home inspector will go over that information with the buyer as well directly, right? But that general home inspection is going to cover the majority of the systems in the home. It's going to inform the buyer about what concerns they should have about the home that they're purchasing. And one little tidbit that I want to add: you should get a home inspection, even a general home inspection, even on new construction. New construction doesn't mean that it's perfect. It's never perfect, right? Like anytime a human is involved in any process at all, there is bound to be some sort of error somewhere. And so an independent home inspector being on your side as a buyer is really important to have, even on new construction. So get that general home inspection so that you have the information that you need to be able to communicate with either the seller of the property, if it's an older property, or to communicate with the builder and say, hey, I need you to fix these things prior to me closing, right? So that's a general home inspection. But then comes the insurance companies and other people who have a vested interest in the property, who might want to know what's the condition of the home, and they're going to require other types of reports. And those reports in Florida generally would be the 4-point inspection and the wind mitigation inspection. The 4-point inspection is used to communicate with an insurance company or with a mortgage lender or something about the condition of the home and the insurability of the home, to make sure that it's going to meet certain requirements. Particularly if you're getting a VA or an FHA loan, they want to make sure that the home is in certain condition, etc. So that 4-point inspection is going to lay out the condition of the electrical, the plumbing, the roof, and the HVAC. And that's what most of the folks, most of the insurance companies and the VA folks are interested in. The wind mitigation inspection is going to communicate to the insurance company how well your home will stand up in the event of a hurricane or a major windstorm, right? So we're going to look at the way that roof is constructed. We're going to look at the windows and the doors and see how strong those openings are, whether they have any protection, that kind of thing. And so the buyer needs to know kind of what insurance reports or what inspection reports they need prior to ordering the home inspection. So that would be kind of the advice that I would give to a first-time home buyer to prepare for that home inspection.
Well, and I think some of the key words you used were inform the buyer and communication. That's right? So big in this line of work, especially when you're looking to purchase a home.
Yep. I guess one other piece of advice that I'd have for the first-time home buyer in preparing for a home inspection is be willing to walk away. This is important because there's a lot of times buyers, they go and they show up and they fall in love with the house, prior to ever getting a home inspection, and in their mind they've married the house, and they're like, this is our house, this is the dream home, right? And then the dream becomes a nightmare when the home inspector finds something that might be kind of a deal breaker, etc., right? But hey, that's what relationships are like, right? And when you buy a home, it's like a relationship, and
I mean, deal breakers, right?
There might be a deal breaker.
You may want to have a list of deal breakers for your specific intentions when you get involved with this.
That's exactly right. That's so good. And so yeah, if you have a list of what you're looking for in a home, what are the must-haves, what are the deal breakers, etc., and then you just reserve that heart. Protect that heart from falling in love with that home.
A little bit of armor.
A little bit of armor prior to getting the information from the inspection. And once you get the inspection, then you can make sure it's checking off all of the must-haves in your list. There's no deal breakers. And if that be the case, then you can fall in love with your home, right?
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely. Well, what do you got for me?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very interesting. We're talking about this whole home buying process and how to prepare, but there's obviously preparations that even go in before that to make sure that you're financially sound to even purchase a home. So what, according to Chat GPT, the most popular questions that people are asking in the home buying process is, what are the first steps that first-time home buyers should take when preparing for a mortgage application?
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, you really want to take a look at your financial health. That's step one. Figure out where you stand. Everybody has access to a free credit report. One free credit report every year. You go to annualcreditreport.com. And is it going to be the exact same thing that a mortgage lender pulls? It's likely not going to be exactly the same, but you are getting information from 3 credit bureaus. You're going to find out where you stand. Now, identity theft is real. Maybe there's something on your credit report that doesn't look familiar. You should really know what that is. So I would say a few months before you're even going to dive into the application, you really want to at least get an idea of where your credit is, right?
No surprises.
No surprises, right? Because sometimes there are errors there, and they take time to get fixed, right? So that's step one. You want to analyze kind of where you're at with your savings, because buying a home is going to come with purchases. You're going to have to buy things. You're going to have to spend money. So, there are certain programs out there that can help, but really you want to take a look at how much savings you have. Just for some numbers, the typical home here in Florida ranges probably from 3 to 3.5% on closing costs of your sales price. So do you have 3.5% closing costs saved up? Down payment, now depending on your loan type, conventional loans go down as low as 3% on the down payment. FHA, 3.5%. Do you have that saved? How are you going to come up with the money? So you want to take a look at your credit, take a look at your savings, see where you stand, and you're going to want to get an idea of where you stand on debt to income ratio. So if you're not familiar on how to come up with that number, reach out to someone like myself. We'd be more than happy to go through that with you, but find out what your debt to income ratio is. How much do you have coming in? How much do you have going out? And typically most lenders are going to want to see that number be below 43%.
Okay.
Now, that's not to say there aren't programs out there that go higher. There are. Some of those will come with a bit of a rate increase perhaps, or you just have to find out. So you want to know where you stand on that. Those are the biggest first things you want to take a look at when you're looking to do that, determining what your budget is. You mentioned marrying a home that maybe ends up with some inspection problems. Well, you don't want to marry a home that you can't afford. So a lot of people, they have no idea what they're going to get themselves into and what they can afford on the value, the pricing. So what I typically do during the interview process is find out what it is they think they're looking for. Some of my initial questions like, well, are you already looking at a property? What's the sales price? And then go from there. And I will show people, go over the mortgage calculator with them on, for example, here's what this would be at this sales price, at this percent, without even talking about taxes and insurance, and just gauge their reaction. Because some people, it's very shocking when they see some of the numbers. Some people, they're well ahead of the game and they know, but you always want to gauge and find out. So that's where to start. You want to start with those key areas, and then we can build from there.
Cool. A couple of spin-off questions that not Chat GPT related, but based off of what you just said. First, I noticed that you said as low as 3% for conventional loans, but I've never heard of that. I've always heard you need 20% down to get a conventional loan. Like, where does this 3% on a conventional loan come from? Because that's the first time I've ever heard that.
Well, it's a common misconception. A lot of buyers are on the fence because they don't have 20%. Well, they just aren't aware. So I think a big part of it is kind of educating first-time home buyers, educating realtors as well. If they're new realtors, they may not be aware of that as well. So you can purchase a home with less than 20% down. On conventional loans, it's going to come with private mortgage insurance.
Private mortgage insurance.
So there's going to be a percentage based off of what your down payment is, or what exactly you're putting down. What percentage of your payment is going to be private mortgage insurance? So conventional loans, you're going to have that if it's below 20% down. As you approach that 20% level of paying into it, it can be removed. So that's one key thing on a conventional loan. You can remove that. FHA loan, like I mentioned, it allows for 3.5% down, but it comes with a mortgage insurance premium that's attached. But not only that, it has an upfront payment that is due as well. So there's basically like an FHA charge, or however you want to really call it, that's due on that. Now that can be rolled into your loan, or it becomes part of your closing costs. So that's got to factor into your plan as well. So, we didn't talk about VA, but VA doesn't have a down payment requirement, so it's a great feature for a VA loan. USDA loan doesn't have a down payment requirement as well. Different guidelines, restrictions apply for your product that you're talking about, but just to kind of throw those in.
All right, yeah, that sounds good.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. All right, so let's hit you with one here. So what are some common misconceptions that first-time home buyers have about the home inspection process?
Okay. Well, we were talking about finances earlier, right? And probably one of the biggest misconceptions is that all home inspectors are created equal, and that is not the case. And so what winds up happening, right, is you get home buyers who they've got this large purchase that they're going to make, et cetera, right? And they're going to have exorbitant closing costs as a result, and things that they weren't prepared for. And so then when it comes to the home inspection time, they start calling around and they start asking, for prices. How much does a home inspection cost, and et cetera, right? And they're looking for the cheapest home inspector. And the cheapest home inspector does not necessarily mean the best home inspector, right? And so I remember us discussing something like this before, but if you go to McDonald's and you get the 99-cent burger, it's not going to be quite the same as a gourmet burger from a mom and pop restaurant, right?
Even Five Guys.
Five Guys are pretty good. There's some better burgers than the McDonald's, hamburger, that's 99 cents, right? And it's the same thing with home inspectors, right? If you're calling around and a home inspector gives you a price that seems to be a little bit higher than you expected, you should ask the home inspector, what am I getting for my money? What is it that sets you apart that's different than the other home inspector? Because if you find a home inspector, alternatively, how do I say this? On the flip side, if you find a home inspector that's charging you a very low price, then you should also be asking, well, what am I getting for my home inspection? Because if somebody's just kind of rushing through and they're just, they're going to give you $100, $150 home inspection, and then at the end you're getting, a Word document with a bulleted list of here's what you should look at. And it says something like caulking, weather stripping, window broken. That's not very informative, and that's not going to help you in the negotiating process. It's not going to help you understand how to maintain your home in the long term, right?
Where's the attention?
Attention to detail, right? But with other home inspectors who maybe charge a little bit more, they're going through your home like with a fine-tooth comb. They're using things like thermal imaging to kind of see what's going on behind the walls and insulation, and they're using really good software and reporting technology, right, to ensure that you get a thorough report that doesn't just say here's a problem, but it says here's a problem, here's what's going to happen if you don't resolve this problem, and here's a recommendation as to how to solve that problem, right? And what severity levels are there, right? The detailed reports and things like that that go into this. And so those kind of home inspectors, they're basically going to do one home inspection a day to focus on the client, to focus on you as a person, to make sure that you're getting the right information for your home. And so that to me is like one of the biggest misconceptions about home inspectors, is that they're all created equal, and that's not the case. So, so I would say that for sure. Not everything is included in a home inspection, by the way. Some of the things that we talked about, the thermal imaging and all that stuff, sometimes home inspectors charge an extra fee for that. So if you do find an inexpensive home inspector, ask them, what am I getting for this money? Are there additional fees if I want other types of inspections? Or if you find a home inspector who seems to be a little bit pricey, ask them if some of these services are already included, and if so, then you understand, like, okay, I'm getting a little bit more bang for my buck by going with the seemingly more expensive home inspector versus doing the a la carte thing with the cheaper home inspector.
Do y'all have like a list then? So like on our side, it'd be called a loan estimate or a closing disclosure. Do you have like a list of things that you could provide, saying maybe a breakdown then of what the service is going to be up front?
Well, so it's
Or something
for me in particular, on my website, there's a Why Choose Us tab, and it says, here's what you're getting. This is why you should go with us, because you're going to get the most thorough inspection. This is the software. There's an area where you can view sample reports and kind of see this is what the end product is going to look like, right? If you go to a home inspector's website and they're not showing those kinds of things, and you're having to pull information and what have you, and there seems to be a lack of transparency or understanding as to why, then that can be a little bit frustrating. And it may be of the buyer to do a little bit more research to make sure that they're choosing the right inspector.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Yep. So, all right, we'll do another Chat GPT question here. Let's see. How important is it for the first-time buyers to understand their budget before starting their home search?
Yeah, so just to add on to where we were going earlier, we were talking about marrying that home that you couldn't afford. And so, again, I like to show the examples with people. We have a mortgage calculator on our website, www.tridenthomeloans.com, where you can go on and just personally play around with it. You want to figure out what certain payments are going to be at. I highly recommend doing that. But again, it's one of those things where on our side, when we're working toward a pre-approval for first-time home buyers, we're gathering that documentation. So that's another part of the preparation process, is to have your bank statements ready. You want your most current 2 months bank statements. You're going to have your most current 2 pay stubs ready. And you also do want to gather your tax returns, W-2s, for the last 2 years. So we're painting this picture. It's basically a 2-year picture anytime we're looking at, in most loan scenarios for mortgages. So you want to have that information available. The quicker you have that available to work on a pre-approval, the quicker we can get a letter to you and to the realtor out there. So again, understanding what you can afford. Are you already paying rent is a good way to gauge it. How are your month-to-month bills going when you're paying rent? Have you not paid a housing expense before? A lot of first-time home buyers, they have it. So again, just getting comfortable discussing that with someone like myself is a way to prepare, because again, you want to avoid some of the sticker shock that comes with some of these things, and kind of set yourself up for success, as opposed to, well, man, I really like that $350,000 house, but it comes to find out you can only afford a $250,000 house. And not to say that a $250,000 house is bad. I'm just giving examples here on what to expect. Don't set yourself up for failure in this. We want to help you succeed, because ultimately, we want the home buying experience to be memorable for the right reasons. Not for, man, this really was like pulling teeth to get to the end of this process. We don't want that. Nobody wants that. You don't want that. Your realtors, they don't want that. So again, that's our goal, and we want to set you up for success. So.
Yeah. So along those lines, with the affordability of, your mortgage, right? I know that there's kind of a way to like finagle numbers and stuff like that. Like sometimes, people are getting 15-year loans versus 30-year loans, and then there's like these point things and whatever. How can like you finagle numbers? Like how does that work to maybe make a mortgage payment more affordable, but then what are the implications in the long term? Like maybe you're paying more interest over the long term and right? There's cause and effect for sure, but how can you make a mortgage payment more affordable for somebody? Like what are the options that they have, and then what are the pros and cons to those approaches?
Yeah, so finagle, we'll try to come up with a better word, but finagle almost has a negative connotation to it. But I do understand the question. So yeah, and that's one of those things where we go back to there's always options. So what we want to look at, if somebody is interested in comparing 15 versus a 30-year, we can certainly do that. Obviously, if you're looking at a 30-year mortgage, you have more time to accrue interest on that mortgage. If you're looking at a 15-year, it's a shorter term, your payment's going to be higher. So, those things are always, you want to keep those in mind. As far as points are concerned, you should always be familiar, and this is something that a loan officer really should be doing anytime you're working with them, is they should be explaining, once you get a loan estimate sent to someone, they need to explain what's on there. And when we talk about points, those are going to show up on a loan estimate. It's because the borrower, in most cases, it can be the seller paying it, but pay attention to that loan estimate, have the conversation with someone like myself to figure out what it is you're paying for. So you can pay what are called discount points to reduce your rate. So those specifics of those you can get into when having the conversations during the interview process, during the, hey, I'm ready to lock in my loan, I've got a contract here. Let's talk a little bit more if you're interested in trying to lower your interest rate. A lot of sellers are still offering seller credits. You can use seller credits to buy down your interest rate. You can do it permanently. You can do it temporarily. So it just depends on what's going to work best for the buyer and maybe their long-term intentions. How long do they want to be in the home? If, just have those discussions. There are definitely options out there. You're not just pigeonholed into one rate. And we will not finagle, but we will work together on showing you the right numbers.
Yeah, playing with all the sliding scales and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great to know.
Yeah, put more weight on this side and it goes up, kind of one of those things.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. All right, what else we got here?
All right, so let's see. Let me throw one at you. So can you provide a checklist of what buyers should look for during their initial walkthrough before the formal inspection?
Okay, provide a checklist of what buyers should look for during the initial walkthrough. Okay, so as a home buyer is going through a home with their realtor, a lot of times what they do is they'll go in and they'll say, oh, these floors are pretty. And oh, look at the color on the walls. Like, that's beautiful. Oh, these cabinets and these countertops are amazing, right? And that's all well and good. But the longevity of your home is not based off of the way that it looks or the cosmetic appearance. Right. There's systems that keep your home functioning and keep your home solid and, able to withstand the long haul, right? And so those systems are really what people should try to look at going into a home so that they can fall in love with that home and know, like, hey, this is probably going to work out for the long term, because you can paint a wall, right? You can change all the cosmetic stuff, but the systems are what you want to be looking at. So the kind of stuff that you want to do when you're walking through a home as a home buyer with your realtor is go to the water heater and just look at the plate on the water heater and take a note of what the manufacturer date is. And if you don't see a manufacturer date, you can actually grab the serial number off of that particular item, right? And run that through a Google search and, put in, here's the manufacturer of the water heater. What is the age of this? And you can find out the age based off of the serial number. Yeah. But go find out.
Have your cell phone handy and take pictures.
That's right. Take pictures of that stuff so you can do research later and find out what's the age of your water heater. A standard water heater could last 15 years, but more than likely, if it's never serviced or whatever, it might be as low as 8 years, of how long a water heater would last. Sure. depends on how well it was taken care of by the previous owner, right? Same thing with the air conditioning unit. You can look at the label on the air conditioning unit. On the inside, you've got the air handler, the thing that the thermostat controls to run, but then you've also got the condenser on the outside that you need to look at that label as well, right? So you got the AC label, you've got the water heater label. Just in general, look at kind of the electrical, like turn on all the switches and make sure that nothing is kind of making funny noises when you turn something on. Go outside. No fireworks in the house for sure. Go, out to the garage or wherever you see that electrical panel and make sure that all the circuit breakers look to be in good condition, right? We're going to open up the panel during the home inspection, look on the inside and get on the, in the guts and making sure that everything's wired correctly and there's nothing unsafe. But you can kind of tell just based on the exterior, observation of it, like, does this look to be in fair condition? Am I going to be okay? Right? So the electrical system is something you'll want to look at. Go outside, peer up at the roof. Does it look solid and flat and, there's no waves or ripples? Doesn't have any discoloration or anything like that? Does it have any algae growth or anything like that? Those kinds of things you can look at while you're walking around looking at homes and get an idea of what the home is going to be as far as condition is concerned before you even get a home inspector out there. So that would be kind of my checklist right off the bat.
How often do you recommend someone service their AC unit? Because it just reminded me, I was trying to schedule one about a month ago and we had some conflicts on time and now I never rescheduled it. Yep. So how often should you do that? Every year?
I would consider every year a good rule of thumb, good, practice, but also it depends on how well the homeowners themselves take care of the unit, right? So if you're in the process of buying a home, you have no idea how well the unit was taken care of prior to. But if you're in a home and you already own the home, you got to change those filters every month. And people say, oh, that's not a big deal. It's just dust and what have you. And okay, this filter caught a little more dust this year. What's actually happening with that filter situation, right, is as the dust collects, the air being recycled through the AC unit has less and less opportunity to make it through that filter. And so the AC unit has to suck a little bit harder to get that air through. So it really is like change it every month so that those the fibers that are kind of crossing each other stay as clear as possible. And it allows the airflow to work, come through, and the AC doesn't have to work as hard, right? And so if your AC's not working as hard, then that's going to last a lot longer, right? But in general, once a year on the AC unit, kind of once a year on the water heater. But the water heater, again, there's another one, right? Like, how often are you flushing a water heater? Do you ever flush a water heater?
I just saw some videos pop up literally like last week on, make sure you do this. Yeah. I remember doing it at my old house. I haven't done it yet at my new house.
Yeah, how often are you flushing a water heater? How often are you taking a look at your own anode rod? And if you don't know what an anode rod is, that's for another series. We're getting deep, but anode rod will help protect your water heater. And so you want to kind of look at what the condition of your anode rod is. And these things are not very difficult to do. It's just a matter of ignorance sometimes where people don't know this is what I should do. But when you get a home inspector like DV Home Inspections, every buyer gets a home inspection or maintenance manual, right?
Okay.
And
I have one of those. They are great.
95 pages of home inspection tips of like how to take care of your home and all the different systems. And so a lot of inspectors may not offer that, right? But it's something that we offer, and it's something that helps homeowners take care of their home. And so hopefully that helps their systems last a little bit longer.
Good stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, hit me with the next one. What's Chat GPT got?
Chat GPT and the most important questions that you guys are asking for the home buying process, right? So let's see. Can you explain the different types of mortgage options available to first-time home buyers? And I think we touched on it a little bit, but just kind of run the list one more time just to be sure.
We did, and yeah, let's talk about it. So your conventional loans again. The credit score, which we didn't dive into, but the credit score minimum on that is 620. Now, 620 for conventional. Now there are some different investors out there that may require it a little higher, but typically 620 on conventional cutoff. If your credit score is below 620, and when we say credit score, when we do a credit pull, we take the middle score of the three bureaus. We take the middle score. No. So we're taking the middle score, and if there's two borrowers, we'll take the lowest middle score. So keep that in mind. So conventional, that's your most common loan product out there. Conventional, again, can go down as low as 3% on the down payment. You have your FHA. So if let's say your credit score is a little bit lower than 620, but higher than 580, then we're looking at potentially an FHA loan, which again goes down as low as 3.5% on the down payment. So that's your FHA. And then we also have USDA loans as well. It's going to depend on where you're located at, right? This is your more rural area. Like there's areas in J, or there's a map that we can check to determine eligibility. If it's not on that map, we can't do a USDA loan. And there are some income restrictions that go along with USDA loan as well. So it's your overall household income. And again, we'll determine eligibility based off of your specific criteria and where you're looking. So if you're looking at inner city Pensacola, you can't get a USDA loan. Right. And then you have your VA loans, which we are veteran owned and operated. VA loans are what we do most of. We love representing the veteran borrowers out there and taking care of them. And the VA loan typically is going to come with a lower interest rate. It's going to come with 0 down payment requirements. And so as a first-time home buyer, kind of gather your information up, look at what potential loan product might work best for you. We can certainly discuss that. And then there are different products out there that can help with down payment assistance as well. So we talked about saving for a down payment, closing costs. So there are programs out there that can help with that. So the big one right now is the Hometown Heroes program. So that's one where it allows up to $35,000 in down payment assistance and closing cost assistance. It does come with a minimum of $10,000. And what this is in the form of a second loan, which becomes due when you sell or refinance. Gotcha. There's no payment required. There's no interest on this second loan amount that's used for that. But just keep that in mind. So if you're looking to move in the next few years, this may not be a product that you want to look into. Gotcha. Because you may not develop enough equity in your home to now when you sell or refinance, that becomes due. Right. So you have to keep that in mind. But there are products out there like that as well. Okay. So
that's good. Yeah, great. That's good. Good list of programs for a good list of types of loans. Let's see what else Chat GPT has.
All right, so next we got, how can first-time home buyers differentiate between minor issues and major red flags during an inspection?
Yeah. This goes back again to the quality of the inspector, right? And for my inspection company, DV Home Inspections, we use a software that differentiates between major issues, normal maintenance issues, and defects that require repairs, right? And the way that we differentiate that is the major issues are anything that is going to cause a safety problem, right? Or anything that is going to significantly impact the livability of the home or the value of the home, right? So something like, for instance, you are trying to buy a 4-bedroom house and you go and you see the 4-bedroom house and one of the bedrooms does not have what we call an egress window, right? So every bedroom is required to have an egress window. And the reason for that is, let's say, God forbid, there was a fire that breaks out right in front of the door of that bedroom. You have to have another means of escape where the window takes you outside of the home to the public area, right? So that window has to be a certain size. It has to be a certain height off the ground. And let's say this particular room that you have doesn't meet that. Let's say the window's too small or the window's too high and a child can't reach that window to be able to get out, right? Then basically that bedroom is not a bedroom based on Florida building code. And if that be the case, then you shouldn't be paying for a 4-bedroom house. You should be paying for a 3-bedroom house because this other room is something that's not a room. Right. and nobody should be living in it. There shouldn't be a door. There shouldn't be a closet.
Big closet, basically.
It's basically a big closet, right? And so that would be a severe issue, right? Then there's going to be the defects that require repair. For instance, you've got some major cracking in your driveway. And if water infiltrates, it's going to continue to crack your driveway and what have you. And when I say major, I'm talking large development cracks, right? Not just, tiny, surface area kind of shrinkage stuff. Big things like that. There's a problem with the AC not functioning. Those are things that are going to make you very uncomfortable in your home, and could potentially cause bigger problems later on. And so you're going to want to get those defects repaired. And then there's smaller issues that are just maintenance items. Like for instance, if you've got garden shrubbery in front of your home, that could be very beautiful. But if that garden shrubbery gets like way overgrown, then what can wind up happening is you start trapping moisture against your home. And so what the recommendation is all garden shrubbery should be trimmed to be at least 12 inches off of the building, right? And so that's a simple,
something right here.
yeah, so that's a simple maintenance item, but it's a problem if the previous homeowner didn't address it, and like it starts trapping water against your brick siding or whatever, and then the brick siding begins to deteriorate. What we're trying to avoid is future problems, right? But it's just maintenance. It doesn't cost a whole lot to do to just go out there and kind of cut up. So all that said, the differentiation of what issues are more important than the other should be communicated by your home inspector. And if it's not, you don't have a good home inspector. That's just, there's no other way to say that. And again, so now it goes back to the, did you pay the $150 guy and then you got a Word document with a list of stuff and now you've been left to figure it out? Or did you get a home inspector who's more like a consultant, right? Like when you hire an attorney, you're expecting that person to give you information. Same thing with a home inspector. You should be getting information about the home so you know what you're getting into.
Okay. Excellent.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to throw one at you now.
All right.
What common mistakes do you see first-time buyers make during the mortgage application process, and how can you avoid them in the first place?
Yeah, so I think it all starts again with kind of preparation, right? Kind of getting that idea. So some of the mistakes we might see is borrowers that have no idea what their credit score is, or maybe now they're applying and they found an issue on their credit report that now they have to take care of before we can get further in the process, right? So maybe that's maybe one of the first things. Secondly is when they're filling out the mortgage loan application, either omitting information or filling out something incorrectly. We need to make sure that when they're filling that out, they're taking time to do it. Don't rush through the process. If you have any questions at all, you need to be asking those questions. Don't just plug in numbers there. We have to verify the information with your documents regardless. So falsifying information perhaps could be a big issue also. You definitely do not want to do that. So yeah, take the time to fill out the application. Take the time to ask questions. And again, kind of knowing where you stand. And then a couple other things to throw out. I was just speaking with a loan officer assistant today that was telling me about this issue, and he had a client who had gotten pre-approved almost, I think he said it was like 75 days ago, quite a while ago, which, that's okay. But as we go further into it, your credit report is good for 120 days. So depending on when your loan closes now, we could be having to re-pull credit. Wow. Now, if someone now takes out another credit card, or they have a card and they just wanted to buy furniture to get ahead of the game for their new house, now you're adding debt. You're increasing your credit usage. That's going to change your score. So you should not be going out and buying the car or the boat or the furniture before you finalize your loan process. Do not do it, because you could ultimately kill the deal. It could kill the deal, or it could increase your rate, because some of these pricing engines that we look at with different investors and things, if you're now your DTI is higher, or now your credit report or your credit score is lower, well, now you've impacted the pricing and we may have to change it, or we may lose it. So keep that in mind. Make sure that you're filling out the information correctly, know where you stand, and avoid buying things. Okay, big purchases you do want to avoid.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about understanding the affordability of the home, because it's not just how much do you pay in rent, but if you're having to buy new furniture for the home, if you're having to pay private mortgage insurance, homeowners insurance, you've got to pay closing costs, you've got to hire taxes, you got to hire a home inspector. Like, this initial purchase really can get ballooned out of control really quickly. And if you do things out of order, that just impacts the whole home purchase to begin with. That's pretty tough.
So be prepared, have a plan, have the discussion first. Do not worry about dumb questions. There are no dumb questions. We're here to answer your questions no matter what you have and set you up for success. So let's talk about it.
That's wild.
So the last one I've got for you, Chat GPT says, what tips do you have for buyers to effectively communicate their concerns during the inspection?
All right. Well, kind of like you said, there's no dumb questions, right? And so here's another way to differentiate one home inspector from another. If you are calling around and you're getting different prices, different quotes from folks, and you got Johnny on the spot over here, like, I can do it for $100. That's great. Ask Johnny, and I use Johnny because my name's John, right? So I can say that. But ask Johnny if you're allowed to attend the inspection. That's a big red flag if he says no, or we don't want you there because you might get in the way. That's not true. This is the home that the client is going to be purchasing, right? It's not the home inspector's home or anything. And so the client should be allowed to be at the home inspection, be present throughout the entire home inspection process. And so, one, the client should be authorized to be at the home inspection and be able to ask any questions at any time. It may seem like a nuisance sometimes, right? Like, oh, I'm being a nuisance to the home inspector or what have you. But a good home inspector is making themselves available to the client, 100%. That's the biggest thing. And so, when it comes to effective communication, the most effective way to communicate is to just ask what you're asking, say what you got to say. Don't be shy to, bring up any concerns, because the good home inspectors out there are going to be able to speak to every single one of those issues without creating a stir, without causing alarm, unless there's a serious need for alarm, right? And so my opinion is, don't just shop around for home inspectors. Look to interview and hire the right home inspector who's going to be able to effectively communicate with you. If they can communicate with you over the phone, well-mannered and seems to be kind of open to you being there and available, what have you, then you've got somebody who's advocating for you rather than just doing a job, writing a report, and giving you a piece of paper and saying good luck.
No, well said. I like that. So don't just jump to hire Johnny.
Don't hire Johnny. Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's see. Leave me with one more.
So you gave me 5. I'm going to give you 5 because these are top 5 questions.
That's right.
Right, for either side of the home buying process, according to you via Chat GPT. This is how we found out what you wanted to know about. So my last question for you, at least for this portion of the segment, is, how can first-time buyers improve their chances of getting approved for mortgage?
Yeah, so good question here. There's a number of different things. Let's just start out with that preparation that we talked about earlier. Okay. Know where you stand. Make sure you're addressing any issues that appear on your credit report that shouldn't be there. That's number one. And number 2, make sure you're paying all your payments on time. So when we're talking about what makes up your credit score, you're looking at on-time payments. Do you have anything late that's going to negatively impact your score? So continue to make your payments, even after you're into the process, and just make sure that you're not falling behind on any of your payments. Another thing is credit utilization. Your overall credit utilization really should be below 30%. Now that's taking into account, what's your available credit to you, what's your credit card balances, your available credit versus what your balances are, what loans you have out there. So you want to try to keep that below 30%. So those are the first 2 things right off the bat. And Other than that, you want to make yourself aware of what products are out there, so that you have a little bit of an informed opinion or stance going into this process. We're certainly here to help educate, but I think the more that borrowers can do on their own as well to kind of get themselves prepared, the better shape they're going to be in. So again, make sure your payments are on time, lower credit utilization, avoiding taking out that new credit before you get involved with it, because there are times where we get an application from a first-time home buyer and they just took out, maybe they just purchased something very large that they felt that they needed, but if at all possible, you want to time those things for after. Make sure you're aware of what you're getting yourselves into. You want to reach out to a mortgage lender and ask them all the questions that are on your mind. You also want to reach out to realtors and perhaps interview multiple realtors as well, so that you have an idea of who you want to work with. This was on selling our home, but we reached out to a realtor and we just didn't really get a really good vibe. She wasn't necessarily as just as open on certain things. So we changed paths and went to another realtor to help us sell our prior home. So there's just, getting comfortable. Even on the lending side, I do recommend getting options. I know we've kind of discussed a little bit of this before, but getting options is always a good thing. We want to show you how well that we can serve, but do your due diligence, do some research, and get some of your own options out there also.
That sounds pretty good. I mean,
So-
is there a timeline? Like, let's say, somebody just bought a car, or somebody, did have a big purchase. Is there like a timeline that they should wait before looking at a mortgage, or what's the best situation there?
Well, I don't think that there really is a golden timeline number, but I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is if you do have some type of a recent purchase like that, make sure that you are making those payments on time. So, that's the biggest thing. If you've already taken something out, there's nothing we can do about that now. It's already on there. It's already on your credit report. Just make sure that you're maintaining your lower balances, that you're paying them on time. It doesn't necessarily mean that every time you have a bill, you have to pay it all off at the same, each month. But again, just avoid those late payments and keep your utilization lower.
Makes sense. And then follow-up question is, when somebody's calling you to kind of figure out, hey, what kind of thing could I be pre-approved for, or what have you, is there a way where they can kind of like get information based off of their situation without doing a hard pull on their credit, and then you guys be able to kind of walk and talk them through about what kind of homes, what pricing of home might be affordable to them based off of their situation, so that they're not looking at the $500,000 home when really $350,000 is where they should be looking to get approved?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we can do a soft credit pool. And what that allows, and this is one thing that I tell a lot of first-time home buyers as well, is there's an option for them to opt out of constant sales calls that will happen after you after you pull a hard credit. So it usually takes about 5 days, and I'll send this information to them with a checklist and an email with a phone number and the whole process on how to opt out. So a very good approach to do this is to do a soft credit pull, have the discussion with them while they go through that opt-out process. So it gives them time to where, if I just go and pull their credit, which there's nothing wrong with going and just, hey, I'm ready, I want you to pull my credit. But if they haven't opted out, then they are going to get a bunch of phone calls from people trying to sell them, on a mortgage. So just, that's something to keep in mind. So I'm glad you asked that. And I do recommend that to all first-time buyers, to anyone, hey, let's start with a soft credit pull. Let's talk about it. But if you haven't done the opt-out, it gives that time frame as well. And we can go through numbers. We can talk about what they may be able to afford. And so, yeah, I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah, well, I learned something new, because I know when I bought my home, the minute I put in a real application with somebody, that triggered all these phone calls from all these people. It's like everybody was trying. I was like, how did they get my number?
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
And that doesn't mean that hey, Trident just gave your information out. So I want that to be clear. It's not, hey, you did we pulled your credit and gave your information out. There's a process to that, and I just, I don't want that to be a negative connotation and like, well, man, Trident, man, they gave my information out. That's when you do a hard credit pull, that information, unfortunately, becomes available if you haven't opted out.
Got to do the opt out. Yeah, but it's good that you counsel your folks to do that, because I know I didn't get that counseling when I did it, and as soon as I put in an application with one, I got bombarded with phone calls from others.
With health insurance too, if you go on the marketplace and you're shopping around, like I had a coworker that did that last year, and phone was ringing off. I could hear it, like right after she did it. I mean, I could just hear her phone was just blowing up.
That's crazy. Yeah, well, definitely good conversations. You got any other off-the-cuff questions for me that you might want answered? Q&A?
I was curious on just how you got involved in this. How did you get started with the home inspection business,
Yeah. Well, so I'm 21 and a half year military veteran, right? And before I got into home inspecting, I was actually in the cyber career field in the military. So it's very interesting. How do you transition from the cyber career field to home inspecting? So I'm glad you asked that. But I was really good at IT, computer applications and, systems and all of this stuff. And what I found along my military journey was that there was other jobs and career fields out there that I didn't know about. And I met a guy when I was going to what we call the Non-Commissioned Officer Academy. It's a school about how to be a leader and things like that. You meet other people from different career fields. And this one gentleman was in a career field that was, for layman's terms, construction, right? Like he was out there building buildings, and when you deploy, you build, areas for people to do their work. You build safety, places for people to bunker down when there's stuff going on. So this young man that I was in school with, he told me about all of this stuff that he does with construction. I said, man, that sounds really cool. It sounded like real life Lego to me. I was like, this is the coolest thing. Like I can build things, like Lego in real life, and you can see the structure that you just put up and you go, ooh, and it just sounded so intriguing, right? Unfortunately, because cyber was such a hot career field, I never had an opportunity to get out of cyber and go do a job like that. I would love to have cross-trained into something like that because it just interested me. I bought my first home back in 2011, and I started watching all of the DIY television and all the home show stuff. And then I just started pulling out tools and started demoing my house and putting it all back together. And my wife was extremely patient during that process, but she got some new bathrooms out of it, and she got new flooring out of it. And
she liked it.
She put a lot of faith in me, learning how to do that stuff. And even along the way, I look back on some of the projects that I did in the beginning, and I realized, oh, I could have did this better. I could have did that better. Sure. But I would say probably 10 years into my 21-year career, I kind of always thought I want to be in the construction field somewhere when I grow up. And so exiting the military, I actually did an internship with a general contractor in this area over in Pace and Milton. And they're really great. Built by Faith Contractors was the name of the company, BBF Contractors. And so I'll give them a little shout out because they took a lot of time to pour into me and just teach me about things that I already knew. They confirmed some stuff that I already knew, but then they added to my knowledge of what I should know about the construction process, about how buildings are supposed to be built, what things to look for, and all the different systems that we talked about before, right? But what I found was swinging a hammer every day is a little hard on the knees. It's a little hard on the back. It was a little bit tough to do, definitely a young man's sport. But now I had all this knowledge, just trapped in my brain, and like, how could I get it out? What could I do with it? And a friend of mine turned me on to home inspecting. He said, you may want to look into this. Looked at what the state of Florida required for home inspectors, and I said, I could do that. And so I put myself back through school to get that requirement met by the state. I took my exam, and I passed the first time go, and then got my business started. And so there we go.
I think you made the right choice.
Yeah.
You found the right field.
It's been good. And, I enjoy going to work now. It's definitely in line with what I have a passion for. Okay. I don't feel like I'm working. I just feel like I'm helping people in their home buying process. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Anything else you want to ask me?
Yeah. So with this one is going to be the, like, I'm throwing the Hail Mary to see if you can say something without incriminating someone or disclosing, right, personal information. What is the worst mortgage lending experience that you've experienced, right, with a particular buyer? Maybe, they had a loan and then it fell through or something like that, like just something you had to work super extra hours to get done, whatever, some sort of, like, is there a mortgage horror story? Because there's tons of home inspection horror stories. We see them on social media all the time. What are the horror stories that happen behind the scenes in the mortgage lending field?
Oh, man. Well, there's a couple different things that kind of pop into my head. Because I also work very closely with our closing team. I help oversee the closing department here. And at times we're at the mercy of investors on processing out our closing packages, our documents, what have you. And this is just one that comes immediately to mind because I had the owner of the company in the office with me. We had another closer that was calling the company trying to get this package out. And this was a file that had been pulled for a random audit through the investor, right? Okay. So, we're kind of at the mercy of them to complete this audit. And, we think, well, we're a few days before closing. Okay, we've got some time here to see this through to the end. But here we are now, and I told you I had the owner of the company in my office, and we are now closing day, and now at the time where this is supposed to be closing. This is a file that's actually on the East Coast. I believe it was North Carolina. Okay. And title company is now staying late to close this file, and we still don't have a closing package to give them. So this was many hoops that we had to go through, getting an account executive on the line, getting even higher ups than that on the line, our owner contacting ownership groups through the investor, and just trying to get, this is now, I think it ended up being 2 hours after the closing time, which was already now after closing the building time for this title company. And this family is trying to move. They're trying to move. And so we don't want to delay that any further. And ultimately, now we're running into an IT issue that's preventing the package from getting out at all. They've finished their audit. We've worked through an internal problem there at their company on getting the audit completed because of some of the paperwork was overlooked, and I won't go into details on what was causing it. But the long story short was we were fearful that this was not going to happen on the day it was supposed to close, and we didn't want to push this back. We've got moving companies ready to go, and we never want to be in that position. But at that point, it took getting multiple members involved, multiple phone calls involved to ultimately close this loan for this family. And it's one of those times where you're ultimately max stressed out day of closing, but you feel even better at least being able to get that closed that day and not having any further delays pushing this closing out any further. That's one. And we did talk about a scenario earlier, which does happen from time to time when folks do make those big purchases. We have to make sure, and even if we've given, like, say, a 10 commandments of things to not do to borrowers, sometimes things happen for maybe just lack of better judgment or whatever it is, and that's happened a few different times. Not just on other folks' files, but on my files. And now you have to have those conversations about, okay, we're going to now have to close with a higher interest rate. Luckily, I haven't had that personally kill a deal, but I have had that happen to where we have to look at, are there seller concessions that we are given that can get our rate back down to where we need it to be for when we qualified you, or are you now closing with a higher interest rate? Wow. Those things happen. They do. So those are just two things that kind of come to mind right off the bat.
But what I heard you say, really, in the midst of all of that is, one, you are willing to work hard for the client and do everything you got to do to jump through hoops to make sure that it doesn't inconvenience the client. And then the other side that I heard was that you're routinely audited, which means that you're making sure all of your ducks are in a row, that you're doing things the way that it's supposed to be done. And so that when you do have an audit, that it comes through and says, look, we're running this business clean and everything is like the way it's supposed to be. And which in turn helps the client as well, right? And making sure that they can come to a reputable company to make sure that they're servicing their mortgage with. And that's a really great thing.
And those audits, I mean, we can originate loans in almost every state. So each state has their own internal auditing process to make sure things are running smoothly. So
that's great. Well, it was definitely good talking with you. I think this was a successful podcast. The top 5 questions that Chat GPT has determined that you guys want to know as it pertains to home inspecting and the mortgage loans and the entire home buying process. And so we hope that that was informative for you guys. Thanks for tuning in.
That's right. We appreciate you.